Hi, this is Kelly Tolman and welcome to Literature Discussions. In this recording I'm going to talk about some of the ideas that are explored in Chapter 3 of Lord of the Flies. Chapter 3 really comes in two major sections, the scene on the beach with Ralph and Jack, and then Simon's little adventure. I would encourage you to try to keep track of where the different characters are located on the island at different times, because there will be some splitting up and at different times the author will switch scenes. Ralph says that they have been building huts for 2 days, which, if the first day was spent boating and building a fire, means that they have spent 3 days on the island so far. Okay, I want to start off with the discussion between Ralph and Jack. These two clearly have very different priorities, and this is really the basis of the hurt feelings. Jack is hurt that Ralph doesn't share his interest in hunting, and Ralph is tired and fed up from working hard with no support from anyone. This is the point when most people tend to side with Ralph, citing that Jack is more or less wasting time because realistically it is going to be very hard for him to bring down a pig, and they already have plenty of food right now. Often my students will characterize Jack as immature, short-sighted, or selfish. But are those descriptions accurate? I think sometimes we like to take a surface view of a person, and there is a lot of temptation to do that here with Jack. If we assume that he is sincere in his priorities, then the traits of immaturity and selfishness disappear. He's clearly not lazy because he puts all of his effort and energy into finding the pigs, nearly all of his waking hours, and he plans his hunts carefully, so it is hard to argue that he is short-sighted either. So, why is it that most people side with Ralph at this point? Ralph has accomplished very little. He can't get anyone to help him, other than Piggy and Simon, and the huts that he has built aren't good. To me, I think it comes down to perspective about how long they will be on the island, and what that makes the priorities. If you are planning on being on the island for a long time, then it makes sense to plan for things like the coming rain. If you assume that you will be rescued in the next day or two, then it makes sense to try to catch a pig before the adults show up and put an end to your fun. So, which of them is right? Should they be planning ahead, building carefully, or should they assume they are going to be rescued quickly, in which case it doesn't really matter what they do? I find it interesting that the author poses this question so early in the story, and in such a seemingly innocent way, because really the question is much bigger and has vast implications. In many ways, this is an existential question, both personally and for society. How do you want to structure your life? Is there a plan that you are following for the long term because you may be in your situation for a long time and you want to be well prepared for the next step? Or does none of it matter because whatever that next step is, it could wipe out everything you have worked for anyway? I don't want to take sides at this point, but I think it is a more interesting story if we allow the characters to have more depth than just Ralph is right and Jack is wrong, or Jack is fun and Ralph is boring. This is also a time to start to ask the question of what makes a good leader. Are good leaders effective, charismatic, productive? Are they helpful, caring? What about driven, organized, planners? Make your own list of qualities that you think make a good leader, and then see which qualities Jack has and which qualities Ralph has. What you will notice is that both of them have some qualities of good leaders, and both of them lack some other qualities. If you want to take this one step further, think about leaders in history. Which of those leaders is Ralph more like, and which of those leaders is Jack more like? We will revisit this topic of leadership a few times throughout the series. Now, I want to turn to Simon. Simon's always about. That's Jack's quote. Jack points out that Simon is always just there. We can't be sure if this is a suggestion that Simon doesn't add much, or that Simon hangs around because he doesn't want to be a hunter or isn't a good hunter, but we get the idea that Jack doesn't think much of Simon. Remember that Simon fainted on the first day when the choir assembled on the platform. Unlike the other hunters, Simon stays to help Ralph. Why does he do this? There's been a lot of ink used up in the religious symbolism of Simon, and it seems to make sense that a British author in the mid-20th century would include some religious symbols either intentionally or subconsciously. But I don't really want to get into all that right this minute. What I do want to talk about is Simon's character. He is quiet, reserved, but as Jack points out, always there. In internet terms, he's a bit of a lurker. The one conversation he does participate in is when they talk about the beastie. Simon seems to think that the beast is real, or at least he admits the possibility, and his belief is a little contagious. Ralph won't admit it or use the term beast or beastie, but he does suggest the possibility that it might not be, quote, a good island. Why do you think Simon thinks the beast might be real? The last part of the chapter is the story of Simon's little adventure. Simon wanders away from Jack and Ralph's argument and into the jungle. He passes the scar and gives fruit to the smaller children until he finds a secluded space he has to crawl into. But once there, it is open to the sky. We'll call this Simon's Grove, and you should update your map if you're taking notes. Here, Simon notices the flowers and the butterflies, and this is perhaps the most peaceful place on the island. Why do you think the author included this event? What is the significance of Simon wandering off, and what is the significance of this place? Part of what is happening here is foreshadowing, because this place will appear again later in the story. But what else is going on here? What part does Simon play in the thought experiment of the author? Why do people choose to isolate themselves from others? Have you ever needed to be alone? Why? Are there other reasons someone might choose to be alone? We can't be sure what is happening with Simon, but we can be sure that the author thought it was important. Thank you for tuning in to Literature Discussions with Kelly Tolman, and be sure to check out all of my video and audio content at literaturediscussions.com. Thanks, and good reading.